Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Bianca Collins. I'm the curator of public programs for the Fowler Museum at UCLA. Thank you for joining us today or tonight, depending on where it is you're tuning in from around the world. The Fowler is proud to present today's program with Kayla Tange as part of our Disrupt the Fowler series. Disrupt is a student-run UCLA organization that aims to establish inclusive spaces and create opportunities for students of all backgrounds to engage in creative collaborations. The Fowler is honored to partner with Disrupt to offer programs that break down barriers in the art world and promote innovative ideation through inclusivity, diversity, equity, and accessibility. Today, Disrupt will be represented by Signatories Joy Chen, a design and media arts major, and Steve Z, a design and media arts and math major. We're all very excited to welcome Kayla Tange, an emerging Korean-American performance artist and sculptor whose work addresses such topics as sex work industry and adoption. Drawing on her childhood as an adoptee in a Japanese-American household and her experience as an exotic dancer in LA, Tange turns stories of shame into a symbolic and valuable medium, using collaboration, sexuality, and dark comedy to explore love, longing, catharsis, and impermanence. Today, we'll hear about her recent projects and her drive to use her work as a medium to break down cultural stereotypes and disrupt societal taboos. Kayla Tange's work has been performed or exhibited at Human Resources, Highways Performance Space, REDCAT, Torrance Art Museum, Performance Studies International Melbourne, OUTFEST, and Asian Pacific Film Festival. Before we get going, I have a few quick technical bits of housekeeping. Once the screen sharing begins, I encourage you to click view options and then select side-by-side mode so the video feed doesn't cover any of the presentation. And if you have questions during this program, please submit them through the Q&A function found at the bottom of the Zoom screen to be considered to be answered at the end of the program. All right, that's all from me. Over to you, Joy and Kayla.
Hi, everyone. On behalf of Disrupt, we are extremely thankful to have Kayla here to talk about her work and her background. So to sort of start it off, we're just all really curious about your work specifically because it spans over so many different mediums, including but not limited to drawing, video, installation, and performance art. So how have you seen these facets of your work coalesce and influence each other, elevating every one of them beyond what is traditionally within its boundaries?
Hi, Joy, thanks for having me here. I think this space you've all created is really important. And I think it really started with my first love, which was writing, mostly poetry. It's kind of a quick way to get thoughts down. And it's really stayed with me throughout my practice. Yeah, I think, it's been a challenge to break kind of one-dimensional stereotypes. I think a lot of us can relate to that. And I think one of the ways that I've kind of unintentionally tried to do that is to use different mediums in my work, a lot of which are new to me. And I think there's been something about kind of learning to use new mediums is like teaching yourself different ways to communicate and learning different ways to communicate and learning different languages. And it's hard. But I think through that, a lot of it has created really incredible collaborations and conversations with other artists that I, only dreamed of having, I think, when I was younger. So, and another way is through a lot of the performance work that has drawn from my work as a sex worker. And I definitely pulled a lot of that into my performance work. And then kind of created I guess like a hybrid version of myself called Coco Ono, which I did a lot of like burlesque and performance art through. And so I think having kind of these different outlets has created a lot of different ways to have conversations in different spaces.
Yeah, definitely. I think that all makes sense. I think it'd be great if you showed some of your work. We're all really curious to see it.
Thank you. Pull some up. So I chose to start here. At this point, I'd been dancing for 11 years and was 2 years into my performance confession series, where I would ask audience members to share confessions with me. Since many of my sex work experiences were deeply embedded in confessing, sharing intimate details, both with the body and through conversations. This was on the street during Miami Art Basel in 2016. And I'm beginning here for a number of reasons, although the experience after the performance was not a positive one. The events following led me on a journey to truly begin to discover and define what my boundaries were.
I don't think I ever will. I've never fallen in love. I don't think I ever will.
So, yeah, that was asking people on the street to share various confessions. And this kind of led me to this conversation around boundaries. And this piece on the left was kind of the beginning of that, where I was being questioned a lot why I decided to perform in provocative clothing. And so I kind of began this journey where I was experimenting with different costumes and collaboration. And this piece on the left is in collaboration with Luca Fischer at the Los Angeles Theater Center, where I began to ask people in the audience, tell me a way in which your boundaries were crossed. And this is a culmination of physical, emotional, and psychic boundaries of mine being crossed. And this led me to realize that so much understanding can happen in this space, in this dialogue with others who share these similar stories. This also led me to further collaborate on expressing nonverbal ways of boundary definitions. And this is the piece on the right, which is also titled Boundaries, and this is 2017, which also incorporates some of these boundary notes in the intro or throughout the recording of this sound piece. And this was at Highway's performance space. Okay, I guess we are not going to be able to hear the full clip. So this video is by Joseph Lee, and the cello composition is Ro Rowan, and the dancers Gabrielle, Magni, Romina Rodriguez Costa, and Caroline Blake as the ASL interpreter. And this is the this led me to defining boundaries at Human Resources, which also included notes from both previous performances, as well as other notes that I had collected from fellow sex workers about their boundaries being violated. And I really wanted to create this space that was a sort of sanctuary, being a performer and being a exotic dancer for many years at this point, and kind of being on display for a long time. I think that creating this kind of public ritual sanctuary space felt right. And the date is actually 2018, not 2016. So it was a necessary action for when our vulnerability is exhausted or abused. And this performance became a public ritual in which I painted myself into my own white cube, defining my own boundaries, relevance, and meaning. And it utilizes ritual, sound, ephemeral architecture, collected confessions, some including my own, in attempt to establish psychic, emotional, and physical boundaries. And this was edited by LA Art Documents. I'm presenting these works in kind of a linear fashion, although they're not, I didn't really see them that way because some of these performances are drawn from past performances or like childhood memories or, future ideas and conversations. And this is a piece that I did under Coco Ono at the Bootleg Bombshell show in Townhouse, Venice. And I was part of the show for about 7 years, and I really was able to workshop performances in this space with kind of this level of freedom that I felt I could really test ideas with a live audience. And that was really valuable to me. And this is a piece where I ask questions to the audience, and then I ended up responding to them myself. And this piece really discusses the authorial and spectator tension, where the viewer is asked to consider personal narratives, where shared space is often transformed into a container to examine social patterns. And this work is also some of the examples of the work that I did that is pretty literal and almost bordering satire, but I think conveying these kind of challenging emotions with humor really became this kind of like valuable medium for me, and really kind of blurred the lines of burlesque and performance art.
I write to you for a single purpose.
And this is a film I did with Luca Fisher and Matthew Condart. And it's called Dear Mother. And it was a visual letter to my birth mother, I think kind of subconsciously in the hopes that I would maybe find her. And this took about 2 years to film, and it used a lot of footage from my childhood. I'm just showing a few clips. But the reason why, and I'm also showing kind of a coinciding performance that I did when I showed this at REDCAT and did dance after. And this felt very much like my public and private lives coming together in film version. This was an important moment for me, not only to show this film, Dear Mother, a visual letter to my birth mother, but then present the performance as well, showing that there is a person who is still very much living this reality, who is very much lost and yet finding ways to show up and transform. The fans at the end are a symbol of that. I made them from letters between myself and my birth mother.
I write to you for a single purpose, to say something, to say that I forgive you. Mom is still with me. I will never forget her or her love. And now I go out each night onto makeshift stages, and I feel the love of strangers.
So this song that I'm dancing to is called Man Eater by Laura Dens. This is an example of performances I began to do with shows like Cyber Clown Girls, which started during the pandemic by strippers to help other strippers make money while all the clubs were closed down. This is where we quite literally had to engage audiences from their homes for almost 18 months and counting. Through this medium, we're able to play with the point of view, toy with power dynamics, and invite audiences into our world, getting close as possible, though the furthest away they've ever been. We were performing, camming, storytelling, creative directors, hosts, and our own lighting design, all in a 5-minute act. It was exhilarating to have this kind of calculated control over my image.
Come out at night, lean and hungry type. Nothing is new, I've seen her here before. Watching and waiting, oh, she's sitting with you, but her eyes are on.
This led me to create another online show with drag king Wang Newton called Sacred Wounds, a healing-focused celebration of the Asian diaspora experience. Also appropriately titled Man Eater by myself and Caroline Yu, a Korean-American artist whom I collaborate with often. This video poem performance is the kind of video we were able to present on our show. It began as an experiment in remote collaboration, as well as questioning the idea of authorship in a work. The premise of this video is to reimagine the Korean myth of Kumio through a diaspora lens.
History has shown us. You have made us hide. Tale 1. A sense of utter, complete loss. Echoes of your name singing under the stars on some mountain. I let the balloon go. Look at me. No, really. Look at me. Tale 4. I remember asking why. I remember the silence. This face. Does it scare you?
And I wanted to also talk about these kind of evolving community projects that I'm proud to be a part of, many of which started during the pandemic and kind of created an almost like worldwide community, which I think was much needed for those involved in the projects and those kind of like peripherally involved as well. A lot of these projects have informed each other or overlapped in many ways. Cyber Clown Girls and Secret Wounds were both shows created during the pandemic to highlight performers while they didn't have physical spaces to perform in. They're both still ongoing. We are doing shows probably once a month to a couple times a year, depending on what is going on or what we need to discuss. Sacred Wounds was really true to my heart, and it explores history, traditions, and truths, and how they can be transformed into visionary offerings. And we've been able to present a lot of work that I really wanted to see being highlighted, and it's been pretty amazing to be in conversation with a lot of artists all around the world. And the Chosen Family is a project, the name that evokes both the last and longest Korean imperial dynasty and the radical potential for queer chosen families that transcend and transgress the barriers and boundaries between and amongst nation and peoples. And that is currently still up at the One Archive. And this Hanzine is a online zine that was created by Han Diaspora Group, which is a group of Los Angeles-based artists of Korean descent who, and this zine in particular was presented through ArtCore, and our last project presented through Culture Hub was creating a series of digitally presented sculptures invoking iconic female figures from Korean classical mythology. And the last slide I'm going to present is an ongoing archive called Private Practices, and it's at Los Angeles Contemporary Archive. And all of the artists in this collection are AAPI artists who have used sexuality in their work. And yeah, reach out if you or someone you know would like to have their work preserved in this collection. And thank you.
Thank you so much. That was so interesting. I'm always in awe of your work. I've been a fan for how long I've known you.
I'm a fan of your work too.
Oh my gosh, thank you. But yeah, let's move into the interview section. Yeah, so just based on this whole conversation about your work, I'm sure many are curious that you work as a dancer and as an artist. So how do you balance between these two different careers and roles?
I don't know that it was a conscious decision. I, needed to work, but I also needed to create work. And so without having a studio for, I would say, like most of my practice, I often turn to the stage as basically like a live studio where I could workshop things, and a lot of performances just completely failed, and that was fine too. And I learned a lot, and have a lot of funny memories of things turning into complete disasters on stage. But at the same time, I think through those disasters, like I had a lot of more compassion for myself, because if I saw my practice as a whole, I think what came out of that in the learning process was, I guess more valuable than the mistakes that I made.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I think just with like art and how we create and doing it so personally, like as you do, and it's like that idea of vulnerability, it's so necessary to be like compassionate and empathetic towards yourself too, even if you're creating for like a wider body of people. Always take care of yourself.
Yeah, I know. It's so important.
Yeah,
As
exactly.
a performer and artist. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, moving on to the next question and sort of going with the ethos of what disrupt is, how do you see yourself disrupting the fine art space with your art, and what challenges have you run into, and what has been unexpected but also exciting about it?
I guess like finding your people, and that was probably the most important thing I learned, especially when some spaces were not as welcoming. I think throughout I felt very comfortable in nightlife. And although that wasn't an institutional or gallery space, I found people in those spaces at night that did understand what I was trying to say, or that did have really important conversations with me. And so many people that I've collaborated with, like so much of the work that I've presented, it has been with people that I've met in unconventional spaces. And so, I think the most disruptive thing you can do is just to persevere and continue, and just continue sharing your story and meeting other people that do the same. And I don't know, whatever that turns into, even if it's just friendships, like that is valuable in your journey.
Yeah, I actually agree so much. I think the pandemic sort of like exacerbated how we see community, and like I think as Asian American women, it's really important, just this idea of collectivity and our experiences and what we've been through, and then how do we share those as well while sparking conversation. So I totally understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, I agree. And just kind of like sharing like a vast spectrum of like what's possible, and various works coming from various like socioeconomic backgrounds. Like I think this is all important to show.
Yeah, totally. Because it's like some of these things are never talked about. Like I took an Asian American course this quarter, and it was just really clear how many stories we have so similarly, even if there's like different details are different, but they're just never talked about because we never find spaces to share them. So it's really important that you're able to do so in your capacity and your mediums.
Yeah, I think sharing experiences that we view as shameful, and then the moment that that someone else shares a similar experience, to me is like this kind of this moment that like time stops, and it just feels like you just feel less alone, and it feels like this kind of like magic moment of connection.
Yeah, 100%. Because I think these moments that you share are so vulnerable, and sometimes there's like fear of putting them out, I think sometimes, but I think when it's shared or you get that response, it's really valuable because you're doing something right, sort of.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to our next question. So between all your work, how do you feel your identity transcends into the work you create, and why is that important?
I feel like I think work that I do kind of has always been this exploration to figure out what my identity even is. And so I think it's shifted a lot. And I think that's why I love collaborating with people, because I think that there's just something special that happens where like someone else's faith in you can just completely, shift your practice into this space that you never really dreamed of before. And so I think, sometimes like my identity is at the forefront, and I really want to talk about things that have happened. Because often like the personal is political, and then other times like I want to highlight and feature other people where my identity is far removed from the work, because I'm trying to make a point about like a certain group of people, or like as a collective, what are our collective ideas about something. So yeah, I think it kind of shifts back and forth.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting because I think sometimes as artists, it's so easy to get so into like our individual identities, but it's really cool that you sort of have um, like a multidisciplinary approach towards the various identities that you sort of have and like all people have, and exploring that.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, moving into our next question. So what do you think is your personal role or calling as a creator? Sorry. And what do you aspire to do or tell ultimately in your work?
I think recently I've realized that my role is to redefine what success means, because I'm not really sure, because what happens when you get there, so I have recently been thinking about like, what does that mean? Does that mean like I'm taking more time for myself? I'm spending more time with my family and loved ones. I'm always gonna be an artist. Like that's just, I wake up and think about it, I dream about it. I am constantly writing ideas down, but at the same time, what does it mean to strive? Like, what are we striving for? So I think a lot about like community and collaborating and lifting other people up who are also in the same community as you is really important. And like, that's kind of what I would like to strive for.
Yeah, totally makes sense. I think the idea of like not knowing exactly what we're striving for, if we reach it, what's next. But I think that's like exciting, especially as artists, because there's always so much more that we can do or that we want to do.
Yeah, and also it's like, to lift other people up. I think it puts your own work in like this larger context instead of being, so I've always just really been fascinated by artists that have done that in the past, like created movements and included other artists in their work as well.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, yeah. So for your next question, and sort of pulling from that, the idea of like collaboration, but who have been your major influences, and where exactly do you pull these inspirations from?
Um, a lot of it has been through listening to other people's stories, sharing of stories. That's, definitely kind of this like through line through my work is including all of these stories to put them in context with other people's stories. And yeah, that transformation has always been something that's been definitely an influence. Like some of my mentors, like Jerry Allen, Sherry Rose, Linda Vallejo, have been like incredible in this journey, of not letting me give up. And because a lot of these women like paved the way before me, it was really inspiring to see that you could have a really long art career and your practice could shift, and that's also fine. And then some other artists that I work with that I presented a lot of the work. Those artists have also been super inspiring, just like people that I know personally. So yeah, also like Shigeko Kubota, Pipilari Gris, Valley Export, like a lot of these performer video artists have kind of been super inspiring to show what's possible.
Yeah, I think the idea of inspiration is really cool. And like people who support you are also like inspirations or like influences in your life. So that's really important.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like
Yeah.
I'm really inspired by a lot of the artists that I know making work right now. Like it's just really cool to see and be in community with all of these people, and it's
Yeah,
exciting.
I agree. Yeah, being with my DESMA cohort is just amazing seeing like the work they produce every class. And I'm always like blown away, especially now that we're back in person. I'm like, wow, everyone is so talented, and it really pushes you to do more too.
Yeah, I didn't have much in person classes, unfortunately, but I did meet some really amazing fellow classmates.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, for the next question, and sort of you've touched on it a bit, but what is your creative process like?
A lot of it, kind of starts from just like two people or a couple of people like Luca Fisher, Peter Kalish, and Rowan, Caroline, you, and Wang Newton, like all of these people, like a lot of these processes I think started through conversations, sometimes very serious, sometimes there were jokes like we should do this, and then something happens, and then that kind of like evolves into this, no, actually we really should do this. And I feel like that's pretty much how most things start. But I also think it's important to use material that you've already done and then like rework it into new projects. I'm sure you can, relate to that, and especially in like design, where it's like, sometimes recycling, old text or pieces of projects kind of gives new life to them. And I think that's, I feel like that's like another really cool way of working, jumping off point. So it's not just like a blank canvas.
No, yeah, I agree. On the like just point, I think kind of like the joking nature of like our generation. It just like is kind of the best way to start things off. Like me and my friend did that, and now it's just like it's so funny. It's like, oh, should we do it? And then it's like, yeah, we will. And then you do it, and it's like really great.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I just feel like there's so many projects, you know, and it's almost like egging each other on, like who's gonna
Yeah.
take this to the next level, and then, oh, we should do this. Wouldn't it be funny if we added this too? Yeah, and then it's kind of cool to look back in hindsight and realize like these started over, you know, you're sharing some French fries, you know, together, or like on a Zoom talk or through text, sharing memes. And then, yeah, I love that.
It's so great. That idea of like collaboration, even when you least expect it. Yeah, and then to our final question, is there any advice you can share with young artists, either in this call or in the future as well?
Yeah, just keep going, and you know, your stories are a valuable medium, and yeah, I think just kind of being yourself, and I guess not trying to mold yourself into anything else, and being like the most true. I think eventually people will see and come around, or not. That's fine too.
Yeah, I agree. But no, that's great advice for anyone who has been struggling or is just needing some extra push. But I'm going to turn it over to Steve, who's going to moderate the Q&A audience portion of the rest of this webinar. So thank you for the conversation, Kayla.
Thanks, Joy.
All right, thank you, Joy, for hosting the interview. And I want to say thank you again to Kayla for, you know, sharing us your experiences, you know, between different identities and creating artwork. But we're gonna move on to the Q&A session, and we got a lot of questions actually. So let's go. Yeah, first one, since you talk about, you know, taboo and controversial topics, do you experience negative feedback and comments, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I have. And how do I deal with it? Having an extremely strong community of friends and other artists. You know, I think that's super helpful to get some, I guess, both critical but also supportive feedback, you know?
Yeah.
You know, people that will be critical of your work if you are doing something that is offending any group of people, I think is important to, you know, at least be alerted if that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
But if it is just critical, you know, for,
yeah,
someone's, you know, singular opinion, then I think that's a whole different situation. I think sometimes if you know you have very strong, a strong will of what you're doing, I think eventually those criticisms fall away a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like you mentioned before, if people at least like have some comments, even mixed comments about your work, it at least it means you're doing something right. Because I feel like creating art is fundamentally about, you know, showing one's opinions about something, and then, you know, people have different opinions.
That is true. It doesn't always feel like in the moment, but if you maybe keep doing it a couple of years, positive things might arise from that.
Mm-hmm. All right, it's great advice. Speaks for me at least. Second question: what are your boundaries in your arts? You mentioned like boundaries in your presentation. So
What are my boundaries in my art? Like what I won't do?
I guess this question is towards like one of your videos where you like paint yourself in the box, and you mentioned kind of like you're creating your boundary in your arts.
Oh, I mean, it was, had a lot of kind of different meanings for me. But a lot of it was, yeah, discussing that my hard boundary is like, I will only do work that's true to myself. And so painting myself into, a box was kind of my, public ritual that was promising myself to do that and to not compromise my values, whatever that means, even if it was exchange for, some sort of fame or whatever exchange. It was, no matter what, like my boundary is to always be honest and true to myself and my own work.
Mhm. All right, cool. And I think the next question is, how has your relationship to technology changed since you had to lean on it so much in the past 18 months?
That's funny. So my co-producer Megan Rippey of Cyberclown Girls and I have had many conversations about this, especially with things, going from Zoom and, being kicked off various money exchange platforms and a lot of the issues around getting, threatened to be removed from Instagram or actually being deleted without any sort of warning. I think whereas using technology for art was fun, and then it became a necessity, and then it became an annoyance to kind of, so I feel like, it's like different stages of grief. But, artists are pretty resilient and pretty creative. So, like find ways through these complications. And yeah, I think that's what kind of happened with OnlyFans. It's like a lot of people are going OnlyFans and then leaving OnlyFans. It's like, there's power in numbers. So, but I was very, very impressed with the way a lot of online shows were using Zoom in very creative ways in which Zoom probably never even imagined, a bunch of people performing using this, virtual background function. So I actually thought it was really fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, then it got complicated. And I think right now there's tests of hybrid online and live shows. There's pre-recorded shows. People are still using like YouTube and Vimeo to do live broadcasting. So I don't know, there's all these different options that I think is a little hindering, but also kind of exciting.
Yeah. I guess would you be open to like host a virtual show on Zoom or anything? Any virtual platforms like that?
Well, a lot of the shows that I mentioned were on Zoom. There was some complications, so sometimes we would go to YouTube, but yeah, I did like hosting on Zoom for a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. guess the next question then. What is your approach to collecting the information from sex workers you interviewed and documented? How many of them you interviewed or documented? I guess, yeah, that's one question.
What is the approach? I think it kind of started with people that I knew. The people I knew for a long time. So I think it felt very natural for them to tell me, you know, this is my first pair of underwear. This is my first costume that I ever wore. You know, but I think moving forward, we'll probably have a list of questions that were kind of filtered through, you know, this process of talking to a lot of the people that submitted to the project. So, I mean, I'm also very open to suggestions because I'm not an archivist, but I'm working with Haley Lohman, who is an archivist. So like I don't really know this process, and this is still very new to me. So like I'm very open to learning what is the best and most respectful way to collect information. You know, like for example, if people don't want to use their real names, if they want to change names of a story, you know, like things like that. Like we're very, very, we very much want to respect people's privacy, especially if you know, doing sex work wasn't public knowledge. So these are all questions that we are discussing and in discussion. That's why it's kind of like an ongoing project, because you know, things might shift. Also, someone might be okay making this information public, and then maybe 5 years from now want to make it private. So I don't yeah, I want to respect that and figure out ways to like continue to be in conversation.
Okay, that's very inspiring. And I guess we only have time for the last question. So what is something you would tell younger artists, or something you would tell your younger self about this journey that you wish you had known?
That it is okay to make mistakes, and a lot of them. And yeah, one day those mistakes will be fuel for various bodies of work. And that's yeah, like it's okay. And what stuff that you went through is not embarrassing or shameful, and that it'll actually connect you to a lot of people that are meant to be in your life.
Okay, yeah, I guess that's it for Q&A. Thank you again.
Steve.
Yeah. Excuse me. That was so inspiring. I really appreciate that last piece of advice, Kayla. It's really hitting home. And I really appreciate what you said too about the way to disrupt. The best way to disrupt is to keep on going, not to give up. That really hit home for me as well. So thank you so much for your transparency today and your honesty and sharing your work with us. I think we all feel really inspired by how vulnerable you are with your work. And I wish you all the best as you continue performing. And thank you, Joy and Steve.
Yeah,
you guys did a really great job bringing us through this program today. I really appreciated all of the great questions that you asked and all the attention that you gave to this program. And thank you to all of our audience members for joining us today. This program has been recorded. It will be available immediately on our Facebook, and we will upload it to Instagram and the Fowler website for you to revisit and share as well. And we hope that you will join us for our next program. In the meantime, have a great day and have a great holiday. Thank you again, Kayla.
thank you, Bianca.
See you next time.